Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. My name is Dr. Fuad Hamid Rai, and today we will be discussing foodborne diseases, food fortification, food adulteration, and food additives. Please go through the learning objectives of this session. I've listed down the things which you should understand and know by the end of today's session. First, we'll start with discussion on foodborne diseases. The term foodborne diseases is defined as a disease, usually either infectious or toxic in nature, caused by agents that enter the body through the ingestion of food. With the increase in urbanization, industrialization, tourism, and mass catering systems, foodborne diseases are on the increase throughout the world. Foodborne diseases may be classified as foodborne intoxications, and these include due to naturally occurring toxins in some foods, and these include letharism, endemic ascites, epidemic dropsy. Then we have foodborne diseases due to toxins produced by certain bacteria, and these include botulism and staphylococcus poisons. Moving further, we also have foodborne diseases due to toxins produced by some fungi, and these include aflatoxin, ergot, and fusarium toxins. And then we have foodborne chemical poisoning, which is caused due to heavy metals, example mercury, usually in fish, cadmium in certain shellfish, arsenic, and lead in canned food. Further, foodborne chemical poisoning can be caused by oils, petroleum derivatives, and solvents, then migrant chemicals from packaged materials, from asbestos, and from pesticide residues. As far as food intoxicants are concerned, neuroletharism is caused because of the toxin found in one of the dals. Then we have aflatoxins. This is a group of mycotoxins produced by certain bacteria. These fungi infest food grains. Most important factors affecting the formation of toxins are moisture and temperature. The more the moisture, the more the temperature, the more the chances of affecting the food product because of the toxins. Then we have ergot. It is not a storage fungus but a field fungus, and food grains such as bajra, rye, wheat have a tendency to get infested by the ergot fungus, and the fungus grows as a blackish mass. So whenever you see such a blackish mass in any of these grains, do not consume that grain, discard it. Then we have foodborne illnesses due to bacteria, and these are infections and intoxications. And these include typhoid fever, paratyphoid fever, salmonellosis, staphylococcal intoxication, then Clostridium perfringens illness, which is causes botulism, then B. serous food poisoning, E. coli diarrhea, non-cholera vibrio illness, then Vibrio parahemolyticus infection, streptococcal infection, shigellosis, and brucellosis. All of these are foodborne illnesses. Then these are viral diseases. These are also foodborne illnesses. These include viral hepatitis and gastroenteritis. And then we have parasitic infections which called foodborne diseases. These are teniasis, hydatidosis, trichinosis, ascariasis, amoebiasis, and so on and so forth. As far as the signs and symptoms of foodborne illnesses are concerned, these are flu-like symptoms. The patient may have nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, or fever, and we may not recognize illness is caused by bacteria or pathogens in food. So proper investigation is required to make proper diagnosis. The bacteria naturally present in the environment are naturally present in the environment, and there are some beneficial bacteria as well which make cheese and yogurt. And then there are bacteria that cause disease and diseases, and these enter food supply, and these pathogens enter food supply and cause foodborne illnesses. So if proper handling, processing and cooking is not done, so these bacteria are not destroyed. So the important thing is that proper handling, processing and cooking is required if we want these bacteria to be destroyed. Further, as far as the transfer of these bacteria to food is concerned, the bacteria present on raw meat, poultry, seafood and eggs can also be present on fresh produce such as lettuce, tomatoes, sprouts and melons. And when we consume these foods, these need to be properly washed before consumption. Then food even safely cooked can become cross-contaminated with bacteria, and these are transferred from raw products, meat, juices, contaminated products from food handlers with poor personal hygiene. So all these things play an important role in the transmission of these foodborne illnesses. Why I have discussed how these get transmitted is so that we know that how we have to prevent these foodborne diseases. Then milk is also a carrier. Raw milk, especially raw milk, causes different kinds of diseases, and a joint Food and Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization expert committee on milk hygiene classified milk-borne diseases into infections of animals that can be transmitted to man, and the diseases of primary importance include Q fever, salmonellosis, staphylococcal enterotoxin poisoning, streptococcal infections, brucellosis and tuberculosis. Then fish can also spread foodborne diseases, and fish deteriorates or loses its freshness because of autolysis, which sets in after death, and because of the bacteria with which they become infected. Stale fish should be condemned. The signs of fresh fish include: it is in a state of stiffness or rigor mortis, the gills are bright red and the eyes are clear and prominent. The fish which are shown in this picture are freezed in ice, but these fish have deteriorated. So you really need to identify that if these fish need to be consumed or not, because you will see in a lot of stores, especially big departmental stores, which have placed all this fish and seafood in ice, and a lot of people can't identify if the fish is fresh or not. Then eggs are also a source of foodborne diseases, and majority of freshly laid eggs are sterile inside. The shells become contaminated by fecal matter from the hen, and microorganisms including pathogenic salmonella can penetrate cracked eggs and enter the eggs. So the eggs which you see in this picture are rotten eggs, and unfortunately some unscrupulous traders use these rotten eggs for making certain foodstuffs, and also use them in bakery items, which are again condemned. And now in Punjab they have the Punjab Food Authority, which inspects different food facilities, and they are very active in cracking down on such unscrupulous traders. Then fruits and vegetables can also spread foodborne diseases, and these constitute another important source for spread of pathogenic organisms, especially protozoa and helminths. And these infections are a serious public health problem where sewage is used for growing vegetables. There we find the vegetables infested by protozoa or helminths. Then vegetables which are consumed raw in the form of salads pose a problem in food sanitation. And people should be educated to wash the vegetables before eating them. And vegetables are cooked and eaten are free from this danger. So proper cooking needs to be done. So with this I end foodborne diseases, but still I would like to discuss with you that in case of suspected foodborne illnesses, what needs to be done, or what food hygiene measures we should take, because if I don't mention those things, then discussing foodborne diseases will be, the topic would be incomplete. And in order to preserve evidence, if there has been a foodborne illness, wrap, mark danger and freeze items. The samples which have been collected, save packaging material, scan carton so that we can identify from what was the source, write down food type, other identifying marks on package, date, time consumed, and when the onset of symptoms occurred, and save unopened products so that we can then further investigate if they are also infected or not. In case of suspected foodborne illness, treatment needs to be sought as necessary. Immediately medical treatment if at-risk groups, especially of at-risk groups include infants, elderly, persons with weakened immune system, and if symptoms persist or are severe like bloody diarrhea, excessive nausea, vomiting or high temperature, then we need to contact the local health authorities. And if food was at a large gathering or from a restaurant or a food service facility, or if it is a commercial product, this needs to be reported to the local health authorities. Having said all this, the importance of food hygiene and sanitation cannot be overemphasized, and food is a potential source of infection and is liable to be contaminated by microorganisms at a point during its journey from producer to the consumer. So we need to take proper precautionary measures in this regard, and food hygiene in its widest sense implies hygiene in the production, handling, distribution and serving of all types of food. And the aim of food hygiene is to prevent food poisoning and other foodborne illnesses. This picture which I am going to share with you shows that proper sanitation should be there in food preparation areas. So you can see this is a proper clean kitchen where food is being cooked. You might have seen a lot of restaurants or dhabas and other places, restaurants by the roadside, where there is no proper sanitation and no proper food hygiene. But in addition to maintaining proper food hygiene or proper sanitation in the facility where food is being cooked, the person who cooks the food also needs to maintain proper hygiene, and proper hand washing and proper washing of utensils is very important. And liquid soap and warm water should be used in this. And now in the present this COVID epidemic, you've been listening a lot of messages as far as hand washing is concerned, and it is being emphasized that hands should be rubbed and washed for 15 to 20 seconds, and you have to wash under the fingernails, between fingers and exposed portions, wrists, arms and the thumb if you want your hands to be properly clean. And rinse and dry with paper towels, not with common cloth towel, because again it can be a source of spread of infection. It may be contaminated. And wash hands again after any act of contamination, like when raw animal or food is handled, or the food handler goes to the washroom or the toilet or the bathroom. We also need to use clean and sanitized equipment and utensils when preparing food, and washing alone is not enough to control microorganisms. Sanitizer wipes need to be used, ingredients to reduce levels of harmful bacteria. Use wipes after washing and rinsing for optimal effectiveness. So it is not a single pronged approach, it's a three-pronged approach. First is the sanitation of the cooking place should be immaculate. Number 2 is the person who is cooking the food or the food handlers need to be clean and tidy. And the third is that everything present over there should be properly sanitized. And when it comes to cooking, the temperatures are very important. There are some temperature sensitive food which are held at above 135 degree Fahrenheit or below 41 degree Fahrenheit. And otherwise limit time food is exposed to room temperature to less than 4 hours. And then dairy products, eggs, mayonnaise should not be kept for more than 2 hours, and discard food left out beyond the 4 hours or 2 hour time limit. Normally what happens in the households is that all these things are put in the fridge, and then at times these are a source of foodborne illnesses. And especially when you are in doubt, throw the food, don't utilize it, even don't feed it to the animals. Then as far as cooling food is concerned, working thermometer in the refrigerator is very important, which ensures it can keep food cold at or below 41 degree Fahrenheit. A lot of people don't have proper thermometers in their refrigerators, so they are at times, even when the food is put in the refrigerator and cooled over there, when the proper temperature is not being maintained, still the food can get affected and the food can be rendered uneatable. And food should be cool hot food rapidly from 135 to 41 degree within 4 hours, and dividing it into small portions, placing into shallow containers. Thick food such as stews should be in 2-inch deep containers, thinner food such as soups in 3-inch deep containers. Then add ice as an ingredient after frequent stirring, and then refrigerate the food. Food needs to be cooked to safe internal temperatures, and use food probe thermometer to ensure the temperature. Raw poultry is cooked at least 165 degree Fahrenheit. Ground beef is cooked at least 155 degree Fahrenheit. Mutton, fish, steak and eggs are cooked at least 145 degree Fahrenheit. Why I am discussing all these things with you is that if we don't take care during cooking and refrigerating, it can lead to foodborne illnesses. So prevention is better than cure. Last but not the least, in foodborne illnesses and in food hygiene and in proper cooking, chicken is something which is consumed in every household, and thawing a frozen chicken 24 hours for every 4 to 5 pounds, and the oven temperature should no lower than be 325 degree Fahrenheit and cook to 165 degree Fahrenheit. And an internal this should be its internal temperature. At times people cook it from the outside, the temperature is around 165 degree Fahrenheit, but the inner temperature is not that much. So the innermost part of the thigh and wing and the thickest part of the breast should be around 165 degree Fahrenheit. And then the leftover chicken which has been cooked should be refrigerated within 2 hours. It has been seen a lot of people just put the food during lunch or dinner outside so that the kids can come later on, or if the husband or wife are busy, if they want to have food later on, so the food just lies outside for more than 2 hours. So this should not be the case. And even if we have refrigerated, gravy should not be used beyond 1 to 2 days, and if we have chicken, turkey and stuffing, it should be consumed within 3 to 4 days. With this, I end the first topic, which was foodborne diseases, and now we move to the second topic of today's lecture cum discussion, which is food fortification. So when we talk about food fortification, it is very important to understand that fortification of food is a public health measure aimed at reinforcing the usual dietary intake of nutrients with additional supplies to prevent control some nutritional disorders. And the World Health Organization has defined food fortification as the process whereby nutrients are added to foods in relatively small quantities to maintain or improve the quantity of diet of a group, a community, or a population. And it is not only food fortification, we do food enrichment as well. And this is the process of adding micronutrients, essential trace elements and vitamins to the food. And it can be carried out by food manufacturers or by the governments as a public health policy which aims to reduce the number of people with dietary deficiencies within a population. And the difference between enrichment and fortification of foods is very important to be understood. Fortified means vitamins or minerals have been added to a food that weren't originally in the food. An example is adding vitamin D to milk. Whereas enrichment means nutrients that were lost during food processing have been added back. And one of the examples is that certain vitamins lost in processing wheat to make wheat flour are then later on put into the food, and this is called enrichment. And examples of fortified food could be like breakfast cereal may be fortified with iron. Then a glass of milk you have with the breakfast or lunch likely has vitamin D added to it. And your evening bowl of pasta could be fortified with folic acid. And I'll also discuss a lot of the fortified foods which are fortification is done at a community level or at the government level. Just to give you again a little bit of flavor that the international agencies and the global networks related to food and nutrition, they map food micronutrient and vitamin deficiencies all over the world, and then they identify, and this is done through the Demographic Health Service, the National Nutrition Service, and then service done by international agencies and by national healthcare agencies, and then they identify that which countries are affected. And you can just see in this that there are some countries which are in purple, dark purple, have insufficient iodine intake, and then the ones in grey have inadequate iodine intake, and then the red have excessive iodine intake, and the white ones there is no data available regarding these countries. So this map is mainly focused on iodine need, and on this basis further it is decided that what kind of interventions are required in these countries where there is deficiency of these nutrients. Moving forward, I will like to give you some more examples of fortified food or the things which are used in fortification. Iodine is one such thing, and iodine deficiency disorder is the single greatest cause of preventable mental retardation. And severe deficiencies cause cretinism, stillbirth, and miscarriages. But even mild deficiency can significantly affect the learning ability of populations. And it has been seen that in places where there is iodine deficient soil, normally iodine is found in the top 3 to 4 or maybe maximum up to 6 inches of soil. And if the area is deficient in iodine, so even the crops and all the things which grow in this soil are deficient in iodine. So today over 1 billion people in the world suffer from iodine deficiency, and 38 million babies born every year are not protected from brain damage due to iodine deficiency disorders. And this is the reason why iodine fortification or supplementation is required, and diseases that are associated with an iodine deficiency include mental retardation, hypothyroidism and goiter, and there is also a risk of various other growth and developmental abnormalities. And it is seen that people who, or the children who feed on iodine deficiency food, their IQ is comparatively less than those children who feed on iodine food which has proper iodine content in it. And now you are well aware that universal iodization of salt is being done, and it was first of all identified in Switzerland way back in the 1900 that iodine deficiency is one of the leading causes of the diseases I've mentioned, and especially low IQ. So when fortification was started, iodine fortification was started, the diseases which are mentioned immediately vanished within 2 to 3 years in Switzerland, and then universal iodization was promoted all over the world. The second important is folate as a fortification. It's a fortification ingredient, or folic acid. Folate functions in reducing blood homocysteine levels, forming red blood cells, and proper growth and division of cells, and preventing neural tube defects. So folate is also fortified. Then we have niacin. Niacin has been added to bread in the US since 1938, when voluntary addition started, and a program which subsequently reduced the incidence of pellagra. Then vitamin D. Since vitamin D is a fat soluble vitamin, it cannot be added to a wide variety of foods, and foods that it is commonly added to are margarine, vegetable oils, and dairy products. And during the late 1800s, after the discovery of curing conditions of scurvy and beriberi had occurred, researchers were aiming to see if the disease later known as rickets could also be cured by food, and the results showed that sunlight exposure and cod liver oil were the cure. And it was not until the 1930s that vitamin D was actually linked to curing rickets. Then diseases associated with vitamin D deficiency include rickets, osteoporosis, and certain types of cancer, which may include breast, prostate, colon, and ovaries cancer. It has also been associated with increased risks for fractures, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, autoimmune and infectious diseases, asthma, and other wheezing disorders. Then it also includes myocardial infarction, hypertension, congestive heart failure, and peripheral vascular disease. So you can well understand that what is the importance of vitamin D and why foods are fortified with vitamin D. I won't go into detail about vitamin A, zinc. There are many other things which are fortified, but one which I've not written over here but I've missed is fluoride. And although fluoride is not considered as an essential mineral, it is useful in prevention of both decay and maintaining adequate dental health. It was in the mid 1900s it was discovered that towns with high level of fluoride in their water supply was causing residents' teeth to have both brown spotting and strange resistance to dental caries. So if you have ample reserves of fluoride in your body, and if you are using a toothpaste which has fluoride, there would be hyperfluoridation, and then if that happens, then the same strange phenomena can take place in which there is staining of the teeth or brown spotting on the teeth. So we also need to be careful that we should take appropriate quantities of foods, vitamins and micronutrients. You can just go through this picture, a very informative picture. It shows that what micronutrients or vitamins can be fortified in what kinds of foods which we consume, and these help us improve our health, like having better eyesight, better immunity, better development, having healthy skin, stronger bones. And you can see, you can just pause over here and see where vitamin A and vitamin D is fortified in what kind of foods, and then double fortified with iron and iodine, This is normally done in salt and then in wheat and rice. This picture, this is basically a government facility where foods are or cereals, wheat and other stuff or salt is fortified at the government level at a mass scale. So these are some students who are visiting such a facility, and this picture you see they've gone in their lab, and one of the scientists over there and the professionals, nutrition professionals over there is briefing the students that what kind of fortification they are doing at this plant. And this shows the different tanks and the pipes, and the person over here is again explaining the operations. The guy over here is explaining the students that what are the quantities used, and for what amount of cereals or wheat and the rest of the things, what are the quantities of fortification done in them. Then we've already discussed these things, that we need to fortify staple foods with essential vitamins and minerals for better health and a stronger future. So this picture has been taken from the Micronutrient Initiative, and you see this lady over here, she's in her household, she is using iodized salt. And with this, I end the second topic of today's discussion, which was food fortification. Now I move to the next topic, which is food adulteration. And as far as food adulteration is concerned, adulteration of foods is an old age problem. This is not a new problem, and it consists of a large number of practices. Example: mixing, substitution, concealing the quality, putting up decomposed foods for sale, misbranding or giving false labels, and addition of toxicants. And adulteration results in two disadvantages for the consumer. First, he is paying for more money for a foodstuff of lower quality, and secondly, some forms of adulteration are injurious to health, even resulting in death, as for example adulteration of mustard oil with argemone oil causes epidemic dropsy, or adulteration of edible oils with certain kinds of phosphates results in paralysis and death. So this is something very serious. But first we need to understand what is adulteration, and it refers to mixing other matter of an inferior and sometimes harmful quality with food or drink intended to be sold, and as a result the food or drink becomes impure and unfit for human consumption. And then food adulteration is a legal term meaning that food products fail to meet federal or state standards, and in our case the Punjab Food Authority is responsible for checking food adulteration, and it usually refers to the non-compliance with health or safety standards as determined in a province or a country by the Food Regulatory Authority or by the Department of Agriculture or in any other concerned department or body. And adulterated food is impure and unsafe or unwholesome food, and there have been incidences of food contamination because of poor harvesting or storage of grain, use of banned veterinary products, industrial discharges, human error, and deliberate adulteration and fraud. In this picture you can see, which is very unfortunate, but at times injections are used to change the color of fruits and vegetables. So you can see two fruits being their color being changed by using by doing adulteration. And then another very common thing is adulteration of milk, which reduces the quality of milk and can even make it hazardous. And adulterants like, I'm really sorry to say, but adulterants like soap, acid, starch, table sugar, and chemicals like formalin may be added to the milk. and most of the chemicals used as adulterants are poisonous and cause health hazards. And as far as the food authorities, food regulatory authorities are concerned, they test for the purity of milk, and lately it has been observed that they have destroyed huge quantities of milk which was adulterated milk. And the test for adulteration in milk can be done using different methods like reduction test, in which milk is boiled on slow heat for 2 to 3 hours till it solidifies and becomes hard, which is called khoya. So if it becomes khoya, it means the milk was fine. And then checking for synthetic milk, and then mixing of water in the milk. Then some mix vanaspati ghee or dalda in milk, some mix starch in milk, and then some formalin, put formalin in milk, and my God, some use urea in milk. So there's a lot of adulteration in milk because there's a lot of consumption of milk, and since the demand of milk cannot be met, and especially in winter season when the production of milk from cows and buffaloes is reduced, this adulteration takes place, and it needs to be countered. As far as milk adulteration is concerned, lactometers are used, which work on the Archimedes principle, that a solid suspended in a fluid is bounced by a force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced, and if the milk sample is pure, then the lactometer floats on it, and if it is adulterated or impure, then the lactometer sinks into it. And I would also like to mention a very tragic incident which happened because of food adulteration, and it was way back in 2016 when at least 33 people, including 5 children, died in Punjab, Pakistan, after eating purposely poisoned laddus, yellow balls, which is a baked confectionery product, and testing of the confectionaries revealed that they were laced with the highly toxic insecticide by one of the owners. His name was Khalid Mahmood. He confessed to mixing the pesticide into the sweets after he had an argument with his brother and co-owner. So the customer who had ordered these yellow balls, laddus, all of them died, which was very unfortunate. So this is the maximum which can happen because of food adulteration, but there could be minor adulterations which have long-term health effects, and in developing countries, unfortunately, people eat dangerous dyes. Permitted food colors are not used, and which are of food grade. Then sawdust is mixed. Soapstone is mixed in some food stuff, harmful chemicals, surf, chalk, many other substances are mixed with edibles, and high levels of pesticide content is present in grains, fruits and vegetables. And then due to lack of fresh clean water, people drink water that is high in fluoride, impurities, harmful pesticides, and chemical content at times is very high. And in this picture, you can later on pause over here, and you can see that what is the food item, and what is the adulterant, and what is the disease disorder which takes place. Unfortunately, some people use chalk powder, and it is adulterated in sugar, and it causes stomach infection. Then artificial colors and brick powder is used in chili powder, red chili, which causes blood and lung cancer. And then aluminum leaves are used in carbonic drinks, which cause asthma and lung disorders. And in some ice creams, detergent powders are used, which cause skin and lung diseases. So you can just pause at this slide later on and go through all the different food items, adulterants, and the diseases or disorders which they cause. With this, I end our third topic of today's discussion, which was food adulteration. And now I'll discuss the last topic with you, which is the food additives. The concept of food the concept of adding non-food substances to food products is also not new, and pickling is an ancient culinary practice aimed at preserving food articles such as mango, lime, etc. for fairly long periods by the addition of salt and spices. And modern science of food technology has revolutionized food processing with the introduction of chemical additives to increase the shelf life of food, improve its taste, and to change its texture or color. And majority of the processed food such as bread, biscuits, cakes, sweets, confectionery, jams, jellies, soft drinks, ice creams, ketchup and refined oils contain food additives. And food additives are defined as non-nutritious substances which are added intentionally to food, generally in small quantity to improve its appearance, flavor, texture or storage properties. And this definition also indicates animal food which may result in residues in human food and components of packing materials which may find their way into the food. And as far as the substances added to food to preserve it is concerned, or to give it a flavor or improve its taste or appearance, manufacturers use additives in food to retain nutritional value at times and maintain freshness and safety and increased affordability and convenience for the customers. But if these food additives are food grade additives and they are added in appropriate quantities according to the benchmarks which have been set by the food authorities or the international food authorities, then it's fine, but otherwise these can be very harmful. And health implications are several, which can range from causing diarrhea and loose stools, abdominal cramps, flatulence and other adverse effects. And it reduces the body's ability to absorb fat soluble foods, then cancer preventing carotenoids such as beta carotene and lycopene from fruits and vegetables are not absorbed, and our immune systems stays on high alert because of these food additives. Just a picture to give you an idea. If you normally see a food label on packaged food, so you will find a lot of these things mentioned in those food packaging as instructions that these are the additives which have been added to the food. And some examples of food additives are like preservatives. Different kinds of preservatives are used, and even in addition to the ones mentioned over here. Then we have color additives which are fruit and are added to fruit and vegetable juices. And then we have flavors and spices, and flavors are real vanilla is one of them, or we also have artificial vanilla which is added to foods. And then there are flavor enhancers like MSG. MSG is something which you find in Ajinomoto, and it causes allergies to a lot of people. And lately some of the companies which were using MSG, they are no more using MSG, and like I won't name the brands of some packaged food items like poultry and mutton which have been packed and stored in different cooked forms. So if you observe in some of the famous companies, now they write on the label that this is MSG free. And then flavor enhancers also include yeast. And then we have emulsifiers as food additives which are added to food. And as far as food additives may be classified into two categories. Additives of the first category include coloring agents, example saffron, turmeric, and flavoring agents, example I've already mentioned vanilla essence, and then sweeteners, example saccharin, then preservatives, example sodium benzoate and ascorbic acid, and then acidity imparting agents, example citric acid or acetic acid. and these agents are generally considered safe for human consumption. And then additives of the second category are strictly speaking contaminants, incidental through packaging, processing steps, farming practices, which could include insecticides or other environmental conditions, and uncontrolled or indiscriminate use of food additives may pose health hazards among consumers. For example, certain preservatives such as nitrites and nitrates can lead to the production of toxic substances, example nitrosamines, that have been implicated in cancer etiology. And some people are allergic to particular food additives, and I've already mentioned to you about MSG. A lot of people are allergic to MSG, and these can cause side effects such as allergies, gastric irritation, diarrhea, rashes, asthma, nausea, respiratory irritation, and hyperactivity. And however, not all people taking these food additives will have these side effects. Some do have these side effects. And the use of food additives is subjected to government regulations throughout the world. In Pakistan, there are some regulations which have been laid down, and which govern the rules and regulations of food additives. And any food that contains food additives that are not permitted is considered to be adulterated. And if the permissible limit exceeds, then also the food is considered adulterated. The nature and quantity of the additive shall be clearly printed on the label to be affixed on the container, and this is a requirement by law. So whenever any extraneous coloring matter has been added to an article of food, the words artificially colored shall be written on that label. And at the international level, it was way back in 1963, where a joint Food and Agriculture Organization and World Health Organization program on food standards was established, with the FAO and WHO Codex Alimentarius Commission as its principal organ, and the protection of health of consumers is the primary aim of this commission. And the ultimate effects of food additives on man is an important problem of public health importance, and is therefore of great concern to the public and the health administrators. With this, I end today's session. At the end, I'll just highlight a few community nutrition programs. This is not the topic of today's discussion, but just to give you a brief overview of some past and present community nutrition programs. Was the school health program, then we have the micronutrient initiative, the Tawana Pakistan project, then the national program for family planning and primary health care has a nutrition component inbuilt in it. Then we have the nutrition wing in the Ministry of Health regulations in the federal government, which lays down some policy guidelines. And then we have this WFP, the World Food Program. They have some programs running in Pakistan. And then lately, this accelerated program for reduction of stunting was started in Sindh. And Alhamdulillah, I was the senior policy advisor with the World Bank at that time. So I was the guy who developed this program for the government of Sindh on behalf of the World Bank. And this is focused on stunting, mainly stunting. It's an intersectoral program in which the health department, the agriculture department, the food department, the public health department, the education department, then the local government department, the agriculture and food, all these departments coordinate with each other to implement this program. And then we have the integrated reproductive, maternal, newborn, child health and nutrition program in Punjab. This also integrates nutrition as an important component for both the mothers and the children's and the children. And last but not the least, we have the universal iodization of salt. Then Vanaspati ghee fortification with vitamin A and D is being done. The vitamin A supplementation is being done, and then iron supplementation is also being done. With this, I end today's session with the closing remarks that I hope that you've learned the key aspects But I'll advise that you also consult your textbooks, including the preventive medicine main textbook which you study, and other books. And if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch whenever you feel like. You can either ask me questions on Facebook, you can ask me questions through WhatsApp. Whatever method suits you, you can ask me questions. I will always be there to answer your question. And I would like you to also, if you get some time, to visit the website of the Punjab Food Authority, which is doing a pretty good job in maintaining the food standards in the Punjab province in Pakistan. And as I always have a thought of the day, so today's thought is that a person who never made a mistake never tried anything new. So if you want to excel in life, don't be afraid of making mistakes. If you make any mistake, of course you can correct your mistakes, but those who do not dare do new things, they are not innovative people, they are not leaders. So if you want to be a leader, you want to be an innovator, you want to be ahead of others, you should be a person who should try new things. And with this, I thank you all, and have a great weekend. Allah Hafiz, and take care.